Walters is back for another season as the official bar of the Nats Chat podcast. Walters is the best spot to go before and after home games, located at the southeast corner of Capitol and N Streets, right across the street from the ballpark.
If you run a company or manage a team, hiring qualified people quickly can make or break your business. Imagine a position of need going unfilled for weeks or even months because you just can't seem to find the right candidate. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. Indeed sponsored jobs help you stand out and hire fast. With sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates so you can reach the people you want faster. This makes a huge difference. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Plus, there's no monthly subscriptions, no long-term contracts. You only pay for results on your job post. Just in the last minute that I've been talking to you, 23 hires were made on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. Now that is fast. There's no need to wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. Listeners will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/BWN. Go to Indeed.com/BWN right now to support this podcast. Indeed.com/BWN. Terms and conditions apply.
We're excited about the guys we got. And as I said before, I know Riz is constantly looking to get us better. So, we might be adding some more players here in the near future. We're definitely looking for some more bullpen help if we can.
And welcome to Nats Chat for Friday, February 14th, 2025, Valentine's Day 2025. A happy Valentine's Day to those who celebrate, along with MASNsports.com, Nationals insider Mark Zuckerman, who was in West Palm Beach, Florida, side of 2025 National Spring Training. I'm Al Galdi, host of the Al Galdi podcast, and we are with you with the first of our spring training episodes of Nats Chat. We, during the regular season, of course, do an episode for the morning after every Nats game. During spring training, we're going to be doing at least one episode per week. It is great to be with you for what is season number 5 of the Nats Chat podcast. You can find us on X at Nats_chat. You can find us on Blue Sky at Nats Chat Podcast. You can email the show, natschatpodcast@gmail.com. We always love hearing from you. We have a website that we invite you to check out, natschatpodcast.com, in which you can purchase a Nats Chat Podcast t-shirt, which are very much for sale. Also, if you would like to sponsor the podcast, if you would like to advertise on this podcast, all kinds of ways that you can do so. We also, again, are offering shout-outs on the podcast. Hit up the man who runs the podcast, Tim Shovers. Again, that email address is natschatpodcast@gmail.com. Nationals spring training has begun. We have a lot to talk about here, as we have not done an installment of this podcast in over a month. We have a Nationals payroll conversation that we need to be having. We have some Nats news from the last few days. But we have Mark Zuckerman in West Palm Beach, Florida. And as we are freezing in the Washington, D.C. area, as we have been dealing with snow and ice and everything else, Mark is basking in the sun of Florida, and we're all jealous. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great, Al. It's good to see you. It's good to hear your voice. I'm glad you're doing well. And it's great to be back for another season, back here in spring training, back with you guys to continue this, what I think we all agree, the first 4 seasons that we've done of this podcast, the expectations for the Nationals were very different. They were pretty low, especially the last 2 seasons. I think the bar is raised for this year. It's up to the team now to prove it can meet or even exceed that bar. But I think there's going to be a different tenor to the conversation around the team this year. It's time to take another step forward. We've talked about it all winter. It's now time to actually see it in practice. And I'm very, very interested to see how this all comes together.
Yeah, the phrase that I've been using on my podcast is rebuild fatigue. I think there very much is rebuild fatigue among Nats fans. I think they have been more than patient. I think most Nats fans were understanding of the rebuild. I mean, you're not going to be good every year in perpetuity. Like, there's going to be a step back period. But the time has come for them to take that step forward. I was hoping it was last season. there were positives last season, but from a record standpoint, obviously there was not a step forward that was taken. There's pressure on the team this season. And you wrote about this on massinsports.com. And I think it is worth noting, Davey Martinez is not guaranteed anything contractually beyond this season. As best as we know, he has a club option for the 2026 season. So, to say he's managing for his job might be a little extreme, but, a slow start, who knows what may come of that. So we may see repercussions if this is not the kind of season that we all feel like the Nats need to have.
Yeah, I think it applies to everyone throughout the organization. Mike Rizzo signed an extension the same time that Davey did. I think, as we've discussed ad nauseum here, once you decided to retain him at the start of the rebuild, you have to give him the opportunity to see the thing through. Same with Davey, and see how it works. Well, okay, it's time to start seeing those results. And that doesn't mean they have to be a playoff team, or doesn't even mean they have to have a winning record this season. But I do think you can't just say, well, there have been positive developments. We're calling young guys up. There are encouraging signs. You need to actually see some results. It needs to translate on the field in wins and losses to some extent. And I think they all feel that. I think it applies to a bunch of players on an individual level. And I think it applies organizationally to all of them. This is the time now to prove that what they've done for the last few years, as difficult as that was for so many people to experience and to watch, that it was worth it, and that they're going to come out of this in a better position to contend again and to contend for a long stretch like they did the last time they did it. So I think it's kind of put up or shut up time for them. And I don't think they're shying away from that. I think they understand that and acknowledge it. The question is, do they have the right horses for this? And especially the young guys who are now a big part of this, are they ready to take that leap forward that makes them the next, group of star players that leads a Washington team back into the postseason?
So among those young players, of course, is shortstop C.J. Abrams. Now, technically, Nats position players do not have to be at camp yet, but Abrams and some other position players as well are very much at camp. And Abrams, in a lot of ways, was the topic on day one of Nats spring training on Wednesday. So it was the first time that Abrams spoke with reporters since that stunning demotion last September. Last September 21st, the Nats announced having optioned Abrams to AAA Rochester. Davey Martinez, during his pregame session with reporters on that day, said that Abrams being demoted was not performance-based, was due to, quote, an internal issue, end quote. And as we know by now, the internal issue was Abrams staying out all night at a Chicago area casino the night before a Nats day game at the Chicago Cubs. And we talked about this at the time. To me, the Nats doing something as harsh as demoting Abrams to AAA Rochester was not just about one transgression. That seemed to be about a pattern of behavior. But we still don't know a lot about this. Like, was there in fact a pattern of behavior? If so, what constituted that pattern of behavior? Basically, nothing has come out about this since it happened in September. So Abrams at Nats camp early. I know he spoke to you guys. Davey Martinez spoke to you guys as well. Abrams has put on muscle, said all the right things. I think it's great that he showed up early, seems to be in a good headspace. What stood out to you with Abrams being in camp and what he and Davey Martinez had to say about everything?
I think what stood out to me is that everybody, I think, has handled this the way you wanted them to handle it to this point. The fact that he showed up early, well before he's required to, I think is a big step and a good sign on his part. The fact that he said all the right things, didn't make any excuses. And they didn't go into details about what exactly happened or, whether there's concern about lingering problems or anything like that. But he didn't shy away from it. He didn't make excuses. He basically said that he's trying to take this to flip this on its head and make it into a positive thing, that this can make him a better player and a better person. That's the same message we got from Davey Martinez. Davey and Mike Rizzo both saying, like, as far as they're concerned, it's over. He's back here. He has showed a renewed, commitment to them and to being better himself and to helping the team. They are looking for a lot from him. It's now just down to, can he perform on the field and stay out of any potential trouble off the field and be the all-star shortstop that he was certainly in the first half of last season. So I think they've all handled it very well. Those were important first steps, I think. And now it really just boils down to the baseball aspect of it. And it's up to him to go out there and now perform the way that everybody believes he can.
Davey Martinez at the winter meetings made this comment, and There was an audio of it, so it's hard to know like how he said it. But he talked about Abrams being a hard guy to get a hold of. And this got some traction, especially on social media. And I know Davey, in his press conference on Wednesday, said, yeah, I did talk to CJ. Like, I finally talked to him and, everything is good.
CJ, the person, he's a great kid. He really is. He loves to be here. He loves his teammates. What he did in the past is the past. Moving forward, like I said, he wants to come out here and play baseball.
Did you find that curious that Davey in December said that Abrams was a hard guy to get a hold of? Because I remember when I saw that, I said to myself, okay, first of all, I would like to hear how Davey said that because, I think it matters how you say something like that. But geez, Abrams gets demoted for a disciplinary reason in September. His manager is calling him up in the offseason. And at least if you go by what Davey said in December, Abrams wasn't returning the call. Like, boy, that didn't seem right. That didn't seem healthy. But like I said, they are in a good place right now. But what did you make of that when Davey said that in December? Abrams is a hard guy to get a hold of.
Yeah, it raised a little eyebrow and kind of like, what are you exactly referring to here? Is it like, well, they've been playing phone tag or like, they've actually communicated with each other, but they haven't had the right time to actually sit down and have a long conversation? I don't know if we ever really got the details of that. It seemed a little odd, but CJ did say that it took him a little time to get over the demotion and that he needed some time to process it all. It sounds like he did get over that, obviously, and has gone about doing all the right things since then. They did have a very long talk. Sounds like it was fairly shortly after the winter meetings. He also spoke with Rizzo. Darnell Coles, the hitting coach, went down to Georgia to work directly with Abrams on some stuff with his swing. So it seems like all the signs have been good since then. But that maybe there was a little period of time there after the season ended where either CJ wasn't ready to deal with this or the Nats didn't feel like they needed to press the issue right away. They wanted to give him some room to breathe. Whatever that is, it did take, a month and a half before they finally connected and really started talking about the upcoming season. But I don't think, best as I can tell, I don't think that was a sign of any strained relationship there or any lingering effects of any of that. Everybody seems to be on the same page right now. I'll just say, CJ, he's not a great quote. He just is a man of very few words, but he's a very friendly guy and is happy to talk with us. And what I felt like, in our interaction with him to begin the week was he's the same guy and the smile was there. The energy, the swagger that he has was fully on display. And I think that's a good sign. I think he looked like someone who is at peace with whatever did happen and is determined now to put that behind him and be the player and the person that everybody wants him to be.
Excited to see what he does this season. Even with his up and down season, even with the demotion, he ended up leading all Nats players in Baseball Reference's WAR for last regular season by miles. Like, it wasn't even close, 3.4. So, even with some of the things you don't like, he still did a lot of good things last season. Hey, Al Galdi here to tell you about the latest great offer from Window Nation for listeners of the Nats Chat podcast. 2025 National Spring Training is underway, and Window Nation is offering a terrific deal. Save 60% off all window styles from Window Nation and pay nothing for 2 years. Now, this offer will end on February 28th, so you want to act fast in order to schedule your free in-home consultation. Call 866-90-NATION or visit windownation.com and tell Window Nation that you want the deal that you heard about from Al Galdi on the Nats Chat podcast. Again, 60% off all window styles, pay nothing for 2 years. But again, the offer does end on February 28th. So time is running out to save big on some of the best windows that you can buy. Window Nation windows are outstanding. 866-90-NATION or windownation.com and tell Window Nation that you want the deal that you heard about from Al Galdi on the Nats Chat podcast. Increase the look, feel, and value of your home. Window Nation windows. 866-90-NATION or windownation.com. 60% off all window styles and pay nothing for 2 years. 866-90-NATION or windownation.com and tell Window Nation that you want the deal that you heard about from Al Galdi on the Nats Chat podcast.
Hey, Cam Newton here, and this episode is brought to you by Roe. Valentine's Day is right around the corner, but that real, good, passionate romance, that strong, hot, uncontrollable romance should be a year-round pleasure. They say the best gifts are experiences. So take your girl on a ride of her life with Rose ED treatment. Rose Sparks is a 2-in-1 prescription treatment for stronger, harder erections. They hit that bloodstream faster because they dissolve right up under your tongue. Getting hard faster means more buns. After they dissolve, they typically take about 15 minutes. Rose Sparks stays in your system for 36 hours, so you can go back to back to back to back to back, back to back to back to back to back. Ro connects guys with a medical provider 100% online, so there's no awkward conversation with in-person providers. If prescribed, new sexual health patients get $15 off Sparks on a recurring plan. Connect with the provider at ro.co/fourth to find out if Ro Sparks is right for you. That's ro.co/fourth for $15 off your first order. If approved, treatment ships directly to your door. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, and or manufacturing review. For full safety information, go to ro.co/safety info.
Welcome to Nada Yada Island.
Next on Metro's Nada Yada Island podcast.
I almost fainted when the 4 new bombshells arrived. 4 free Samsung Galaxy A16 5G phones at Metro.
No way.
And finding out the 4th line is free. Oh, things got heated.
That's wild. Join Metro and get 4 free Samsung 5G phones. Only at Metro.
Plus tax. Bring 4 numbers and an ID and sign up for any Metro Flex plan. Not available currently at T-Mobile or been with Metro in the past 180 days.
We look at payroll as a whole in a bunch of different buckets. You know what I mean? The players in the field is about the same, if not a little less than it was last year. But I think that we have a better team than we had last year.
Before we get to the payroll conversation, some news from Thursday at Nationals camp. The Nats' top pitching prospect, Travis Sykora, likely will not be pitching in games until May due to off-season hip surgery. You know, one of the things about the early days of spring training is that you almost always get surprised by, oh, that guy's hurt? I didn't know that. And, the team will reveal that. And sure enough, we found out on Thursday that Sykora underwent off-season hip surgery. Travis Sykora right now, per MLB Pipeline, is the Nats' number 1 pitching prospect, number 2 overall prospect behind outfielder Dylan Cruz. He is the number 70 overall prospect in baseball. He was the 2024 Carolina League Pitcher of the Year, had a tremendous season for the Nats' Low-A affiliate, the Fredericksburg Nationals last season, what was just his age 20 season. Nats took him in the 3rd round of the 2023 MLB draft out of a high school in Texas. I guess the fact that he could be pitching in May would suggest that this isn't too serious, but boy, you don't like to hear that a guy like Sykora underwent off-season hip surgery.
No, and I mean, Mike Rizzo referred to it as a minor labrum surgery, but as we know, there's no such thing really as minor surgery for anyone, especially for pitchers. That's not his arm, so that's, better, that it was his hip and nothing else. But it did kind of come out of the blue and something that didn't just happen, but that this went on during the off season. Now, I mean, Sykora is a guy who's still got a long ways to go. As you said, drafted out of high school, just had his first professional season, was really good, obviously, and probably ticketed for high single A Wilmington, at least to begin this year. But if he continues to dominate the way that he did in the low A ball, then, maybe there is another promotion to come. And maybe he is one of these guys who can reach the big league quickly. He's a 3rd round pick who was a 1st round talent, and they paid him big money to not go to college, to sign with them instead. And his professional career got off to a great start. So you hope this is just a blip and nothing more than that. But, until you see him out there pitching in minor league games and having success and then doing it again every 5 days after that, you do have to keep an eye on it and at least be a little bit cautious about what this means for him. Hopefully it does not, disrupt his timeline much at all, but it did kind of come out of the blue that he is someone who had surgery in the offseason that none of us were aware of.
And bullpen sessions on Thursday for Cade Cavalli and Harleen Susana. Susana doing, as you would anticipate, putting on a show. But how is Cade Cavalli doing?
He is fully healthy. He had a normal offseason. He is participating fully in spring training with everyone else. It was good to see him throwing off the mound. He looked perfectly normal to my untrained eye, but even to the trained eyes, they all said that everything is good. Now, the one qualifier with Cavalli is this, and I think we kind of suspected this. They are going to be careful with him. They are managing his workload this year, even if he is fully healthy. He's not pitching from day 1 to day 162, starting every 5th day. They're going to have to limit his workload, his innings. He hasn't pitched in 2 years now, so you can understand why that's the case. And the plan, the way that Davey Martinez has outlined it, is whenever he is ready to pitch in games, and that can mean the minor leagues or the major leagues, they want to make sure that when he starts doing that, he can finish out the year from there without being shut down. So reading between the lines, that says to me they're going to slow play this, and that by the end of spring, he may still be down here. He may start the year on the IL, even if he is healthy. They're going to take it slowly, and then at some point, I don't know, May, June, whatever that is, maybe he then now is finally starting to pitch in games again. And the idea would be that however many innings they're limiting him to this year, and my guess is it's pretty low given the lack of innings that he's already accumulated as a professional, and certainly the last 2 years while recovering from Tommy John surgery, that it's going to be very closely monitored and not free reign the way you would hope that he would be at this stage of his career.
Safe to say he'll begin the season in the minors?
At best. Like I said, it could even be on the injured list and staying in Florida to continue working out. I don't really see a scenario that he's part of the Nationals opening day rotation because, again, if the idea is if he's pitching, then he's got to keep going and they're not going to shut him down for any reason. Well, he's not going from April 1st all the way through September. And just beyond everything else, he's made one major league start at this point. He's pitched in a couple of minor league games last year, rehab assignment games. Like, he just needs to pitch and kind of reestablish who he can be. Not just that he's healthy, but that he can be an effective pitcher. Now, they still have every reason to believe he can be a good big league pitcher with good stuff, but he's got to show that every 5th day. And so that'll happen eventually in the minor leagues. And then once he's established that, and if they have the need for it at the big league level, then we finally see him in DC.
All right, the payroll. So we went into the Nationals 2024-2025 offseason with the question that everyone had, which was, what would Mike Rizzo be allowed to do in terms of spending? I think everyone agreed that now was the time to start spending. When you're in a rebuild, the initial off seasons of the rebuild, I don't think warrant spending money. And I think it's a little silly when people get caught up in why isn't this team spending when it's, bound to win 65, 70 games. But when you're trying to bust out of a rebuild and you have a sense of what you have and it's time to take that step forward, that's when you do start spending. Not, recklessly, but, aggressively, astutely, etc. The Nats this offseason did not do that. And I think we were plenty fair about, okay, let's let the offseason play out. Let's let it breathe. Let's not overreact in November and scream and yell about, the learners aren't spending any money, because the MLB offseason takes a long time to play out, as we are seeing. Alex Bregman just signed with Boston, 5 minutes ago, it feels like. But ultimately, the Nats in the offseason did not do much in terms of spending. Now, that doesn't mean that the moves they made might not turn out to be wise. It doesn't mean that the moves that the Nats made might not turn out to be really shrewd moves. But significant money was not spent. If you sort of bottom line what the Nats did in the offseason in terms of free agency, you're looking at like 7 significant acquisitions / re-signings. You had the trade for Nathaniel Lowe. You had the signing of Josh Bell, 1 year, $6 million. The signing of Ahmed Rosario, 1 year, $2 million. The signing of Michael Soroka, 1 year, $9 million. The re-signing of Trevor Williams, 2 years, $14 million. The signing of Shinosuke Ogasawara, 2 years, $3.5 million. The signing of reliever Jorge Lopez, 1 year, $3 million. Mike Rizzo, in his session with you guys on Thursday, saying that the payroll might actually be less than last year. He said that.
Players in the field is about the same, if not a little less than it was last year.
And it's interesting to me that he said that, because it came off to me like he wanted that out there, that the payroll for this year may well be less than last year. Boy, did that stand out. I spoke with a guy who we know well, Barry Verlugo, the Washington Post, in a conversation on my podcast this week. I asked him point blank. I said, do you think Mike Rizzo in the offseason wanted to spend more, but was not allowed to spend more by the learners? Barry said yes. And Barry, I think, has a good sense of this thing. Mark, the Nats did not do what we wanted them to do, what we thought they might do, what a lot of fans wanted them to do, and that's spend significant money. Now, again, doesn't mean the offseason was like a disaster. Maybe the offseason turns out to be really good, but this is significant, that the kind of spending that a lot of fans wanted did not happen, And it may well be that Mike Rizzo was not allowed to do the things that he wanted to do.
It certainly comes across that way. And I don't think there's any fault in drawing those kind of conclusions based on what the actual results are here. Those 7 players that they signed are going to make about $40 million combined between them. And 3 of them are under club control for another season. They're going to make $24 million next year, roughly. That's Lowe, Williams, and Ogasawara. Those are not the big kind of moves that we thought were possible from them, and not the kind of moves that, honestly, Rizzo was kind of suggesting at the end of the season. He said he felt like it was time to add veterans to what they already had here in place. And while he wasn't going to come right out and say, okay, we're going to sign one of the biggest name free agents or anything like that, it seemed to me that he was going into the offseason expecting, or at least hoping, that he would have the ability to add significantly to the roster.
We certainly need to be active in the free agent market. We need to be active in the trade market.
And the moves they've made, again, they might be solid moves. I think Nathaniel Lowe is a savvy move, giving up Robert Garcia for 2 years of control of a Gold Glove winning first baseman who can hit for some power. I mean, I think that could be a good move. If they could have gotten Christian Walker, would they have gotten him? I think, yeah, that was number 1 on their list, and they didn't get him. Now, let's also remember that if you're the Nationals and you're competing for free agents, you have to convince them to sign with you over someone else. And for someone like Christian Walker, who had offers from some pretty good teams and wound up with the Astros, chances are the only way you're coming to Washington is if you are getting an offer that's significantly higher than the other teams gave you. That's essentially how Jason Worth wound up in D.C. They offered him an extra year or even 2 years more than anyone else, and that, sealed the deal. So, they're already behind the 8 ball going into all this, trying to sign big name guys. The offseason's not over. There are still a good number of pretty good free agents out there. So I do think it's possible they're still in the market for someone. I don't think it's a big ticket item. I don't think they were in on Alex Bregman down to the end. Certainly not when you saw what he got, $40 million a year. The one area that I think stands out the most to me, I think you can look at the moves they made to the lineup with Lowe and Bell and say, okay, that makes sense. I see what they're doing. Look at the moves they made in the rotation, Soroka, Williams, Ogasawara, and say, okay, you would have liked a frontline pitcher, but it wasn't like an absolute necessity. And they have some pretty good pitching depth there now. I can understand that. It's the bullpen that I think is the most glaring example of this. They decided to non-tender Kyle Finnegan, didn't want to pay him the $8 to $9 million he would have gotten in arbitration. We have talked about this at the time. There's a logical baseball reason maybe for doing that. You don't believe that he was locked down enough to pay that kind of money to. And I said, I think at the time, it makes sense if you do that and you now apply that money to someone you believe is better. They have not done that yet. Jorge Lopez is the only real prominent reliever they signed. They gave him $3 million. If the season began today, Jorge Lopez might be their closer. It's him or Jose Ferrer. Now, they're acknowledging that they still need some help there.
Definitely, for me, it's going to be hopefully somebody that can pitch in the back end of the bullpen. That's kind of what we're looking for.
And I do think there's still a chance of them signing a back-end reliever, maybe even a probability of them signing a back-end reliever before camp is over. But is it going to be a big ticket item, or is it going to be a lower item that fits more in with what else they've done this winter? Feels more like the latter than the former. And so while we may ultimately say the team did improve and that they made some calculated moves at specific positions that they needed, I think in the larger picture, it's perfectly acceptable to be discouraged by the lack of spending from them this winter. And the lack of spending sure seems like that was dictated from the top, not from the GM's office.
Well, from a bullpen standpoint, they have to make moves. I mean, they can't go into the regular season with this as the bullpen. So I think moves are coming, but who exactly they will be, we don't know. There are 2 real big picture concerns with the lack of spending. Number one is that you have your head of baseball operations, and he's not being allowed to do as he wants to do. And that's a problem, Ideally, the way a big-time pro sports franchise works is ownership supports the person running the operations, but the person running the operations runs the operations. It's not ownership. It's ownership supporting that person, overseeing that person to an extent, yes, but you sort of give the keys to the car to your Mike Rizzo and you say, go to work and do as you see fit because we trust you. And especially with Mike Rizzo, who's been here for a decade and a half, if nothing else, he has earned that. And right now, it seems like he's handcuffed. He can't do what he wants to do. That's a problem. That's not healthy. The second thing is this. If you weren't going to spend this offseason, when exactly are you going to spend? And if the Nats do have a decent season, a good season, what about next offseason? Does ownership say, well, you guys did pretty well with these young kids, so I don't, why should we be spending more money on this, You don't need to have ownership that goes bonkers every offseason, but you need to have that sort of item in your cupboard of if you need to spend, you can spend. Like that's what good ownership will do. And the Lerners for years did do that. But things have changed, as we know. And I think for so many Nats fans, the concern now is that the days of the Lerners spending on players are over. And so regardless of what happens this season, even if the Nats have a very nice season, 85 wins, 90 wins, let's say, that's not going to result in next offseason being appreciably different from this offseason. And I know it's very frustrating. I hear from a lot of Nats fans. I know that you do too. And, you look at the players who the Nats signed in the offseason, and again, they might work out. Like, I don't want to be dismissive of these people. And like with the Nathaniel Lowe trade, I think that's a really shrewd trade by Rizzo. But, if you're being honest about who the Nats signed here, Josh Bell, since he left the Nats, has been a bad player. He's been a below replacement level player. He has really struggled these last few years. When people say, well, they addressed the power by signing Josh Bell, I'm like, well, if it's 2021 Josh Bell, maybe. But the Josh Bell of the last few years is not the Josh Bell who you remember here. You look at someone like Ahmed Rosario. Rosario has had 5 stints with 4 major league teams over the last 2 regular seasons. You look at Jorge Lopez, who you said might be their closer right now. Jorge Lopez has become a vagabond. He's pitched for 5 major league teams over the last 2 regular seasons. Michael Soroka had a really tough 2024 season to where he did his best work as a reliever, not as a starter, and yet he's being talked about as a potential starter for the Nats. And then the one that cracks me up the most is Shinosuke Ogasawara. So finally, the Nats go to the Asian market, right? This is something that they had never done. It was good to see them do this. And you say, okay, well, that maybe is a sign that they're spending money. Boy, I wonder what the terms of this deal were. And I remember this came out. 2 years, $3.5 million. Like, this was not, the Daisuke Matsuzaka signing. This was 2 years, $3.5 million. And, if not for the fact that his agent used to work for the Nats, Brian Meditti was the Nats assistant GM years ago, I don't know that this guy's even here. But, that to me is something. A lot of teams, when they sign a Japanese player, a foreign player, it's big money. You're like, wow, that's a move. This is 2 years, $3.5 million, So, yeah, I don't blame any Nats fan for being underwhelmed. I don't blame any Nats fan for being discouraged. And I think you have to ask the question, where exactly are we going here if this is how it is right now with ownership?
Yeah, it's an absolutely fair question. And I also wonder, you said, what happens next offseason, even if they have a good year? I'll go even rosier view. What if they're in the race in July? Are they trade deadline buyers? Are they willing to give up prospects and take on salary of veteran players on expiring contracts? Something like that? Or are they restricted in what they can do? I mean, I would love to see them be in that position to have to answer that question. There's a long way to go between now and then. So we'll see. The one other point I'd make, and Rizzo mentioned this, and I think there's a little bit something to this. He did say 2 important things. They didn't want to block any prospects that they feel are going to be a big part of their future.
We didn't want to block any prospects that we feel that are going to be our future players.
Reading between the lines, I could look at third base in particular in that regard. If they believe that Brady House or Yohandy Morales is going to be a third baseman, a good one for them for a long time, you don't go get Alex Bregman or, even a lesser name that's going to be here on a multi-year deal. You stick with Jose Tena for now and wait for House to be ready. So I kind of understand that argument. And then he also said, I thought this was important, we didn't want to give up any draft picks or international money, which is important to us at this stage.
We didn't want to give up any draft picks and any international money, which is important to us at this stage.
So for those who don't know, when you sign top-tier free agents, you do lose draft picks and in some cases international signing bonus money as a result of that. Is sort of a penalty or a way to allow the team who lost those free agents to get something in return. And so he's basically saying, like, I don't want to give up a high draft pick just to sign a frontline free agent. Now, they had done that in the past and lost first-round picks by signing, top-tier free agents. Didn't always work out for them in that regard. So I think that's a little bit of a qualifier that's worth putting in there. It doesn't excuse all of it. It doesn't mean that they can't ever go sign a top free agent, because that's not a great way to go about doing business. What it all says to me is they are truly banking now, for better or worse, on the young core leading the way, on those guys really being the difference between what was a 71-win team last year and potentially a team that wins something in the 80s this year. If it happens, it's going to be because of them. It's not going to be because of the additions they made this winter.
It is rare that a team busts out of a rebuild solely on the backs of prospects. It can happen. Normally, that's not what does happen. Normally, it's prospects plus some trade acquisitions, some free agent supplementation. The Orioles actually busted out of their rebuild on the backs of prospects. So perhaps the Nats could do as the Orioles did a few years ago. But it's tough to do. A lot has to break well. And, you can hit on a good number of your building blocks, but still not bust out of the rebuild, just because you're not going to necessarily hit on everyone. And, there are degrees of hitting. Like, guys can, when I say hitting, I mean hitting on the prospect. Like, the guy could be good, but maybe not great. And so if he's not great, maybe that doesn't catapult you into that 90-win territory. December 10th, Mike Rizzo was on MLB Network's MLB Tonight. We talked about this. This was at the winter meetings. And Rizzo said something that, to me, in a lot of ways, is the defining quote of this Nats offseason. Now's not the time to hit the brakes, it's to hit the gas. And I brought this up on the show. I said, Rizzo, to me, was talking as much to his bosses when he said that as he was talking to the rest of us. And that he, on Thursday in his session with you guys, put it out there that the payroll might be less than last year. Mike Rizzo's not a dumb guy. He's a smart guy. I think he knows what he's doing when he puts this stuff out there. When he said what he said on MLB Network, when he said what he said to you guys on Thursday, I think there is a sub-communication going on here of, guys, I'm doing what I can, but I can only do what I'm allowed to do. And I think that's something to take note of if, in fact, you are following this stuff, as I know so many of you are.
Hey, Nats fans. After the exciting Nats game, have a listen to some relaxing solo piano music to unwind and help you go to sleep. I'm Tim Newmark, the composer of the Nats Chat theme song, and you can find my latest music on Spotify, Apple Music, Pandora, and anywhere you stream music. The song you're hearing now is called Improv in A-flat major, The End of the Road.
Shopping is hard, right? But there's a better way. Stitch Fix online personal styling makes it easy. I just give my stylist my size, style, and budget preferences. I order boxes when I want and how I want. No subscription required. And she sends just for me pieces. Plus outfit recommendations and styling tips. I keep what I love and send back the rest. It's so easy. Personal styling for everyone. Get started today at stitchfix.com/Spotify. That's stitchfix.com/Spotify.
Shocking news coming out of Australia today. Tinder's summer news team reports. A single woman in Melbourne today fainted after discovering that there are actually men out there who don't think Saturdays are just for the boys. This comes off the back of new research suggesting that thousands of Aussies have found themselves in a bubble. Think you're in a bubble? Break out of it this summer with Tinder.
The one guy that everybody wants to hear about is Cade Cavalli, and Cade is doing great. He really is. He's healthy. We're going to manage his workload. When he starts, we want him to finish the season. So we don't know where that's going to be.
With the Nats rotation, I found this kind of funny. Soroka has been told that he's in the mix to be a starter. Ogasawara has been told that he's in the mix to be a starter. Trevor Williams has been told that he's in the mix to be a starter. We already have, right, the guys who you assume are slam dunks to be in the rotation. At least two. You still have a DJ Hurst and Mitchell Parker, who knows where they might stand. I guess the idea is tell everyone they're in position to be a starter and kind of see what shakes out. But they can't all be starting pitchers come opening day, right?
No, they can't. I mean, if everybody's healthy, and knock on wood, they all will be, that's at least 7 names there, and maybe even more than that if you count a few others. So I have asked Davey Martinez and Mike Rizzo that version of that question here the last couple of days of like, what do you end up doing there? The 2 possibilities are that somebody could be in the bullpen as a long reliever, but Rizzo kind of said, especially when it comes to younger guys, that he still believes in the idea of being a starting pitcher and that you are going to be needed eventually. And it sounded to me like he would rather have, say, a Mitchell Parker or DJ Hers start every 5 days at AAA than pitch occasionally in a major league bullpen. And we'll see if it all comes to that or not. But if everybody's healthy at the end, then given the money they paid to Sykora and Williams in particular, I think they're in the rotation. It's the 2 of them. It's Mackenzie Gore and Jake Irvin. That's 4 spots. And now you have the 2 young lefties from last year in Parker and Hers and the new guy from Japan, Ogasawara, and there's only 1 spot left for them. Now, I think Ogasawara is a very interesting situation, and we're going to see him for the first time on Friday and start to get a sense of what he is and how good he may or may not be. They've talked about how the transition from Japan, it's a different throwing schedule. It's not once a week. It's every 5 days now. It's learning a whole new league, a new ball, a different style of pitching. It may take a little time for that to happen. And while we tend to think of these kind of signings as, hey, they are immediately slotted into the rotation, I think the fact that the salary is relatively low, as you pointed out, and he does have minor league options as a brand new player on a 40-man roster, it wouldn't shock me if they decide at the end of spring training, you know what, he's not quite ready yet. Let's let him get his feet wet in Rochester before we bring him up if he does well there. So I'm not writing his name down in ink, certainly, to be part of the opening day pitching staff. I wouldn't be shocked if he wound up at AAA.
He's an interesting guy because he doesn't generate strikeouts, which is concerning, but he also doesn't walk guys, and he also doesn't give up home runs. And so, you wonder how that might translate to the majors. I mean, we have seen over the last 20, even 30 years, Japanese players can come here and do well. This stigma that like you're really, a notch or 2 below MLB caliber if you pitch in Japan, if you play in Japan. It's not really true. I mean, not everyone can do it, but plenty of guys have come over and done just fine. But when you look at his numbers for the Chinichi Dragons over the last 2 regular seasons, strikeouts per 9 innings are just 6.37. That's concerning. You weren't striking guys out in Japan. What's it going to be like in MLB? But the walks per 9 innings, just 186. The home runs allowed per 9 innings, 0.68. So, you can work with that, but, how effective you will be is tough to say. So we'll see on something like that. With Sykora, so like I said, more effective as a reliever last season than as a starting pitcher, but they do want to see if he can be a starter for them, huh?
Yeah, the feeling is that the success at the end of the season was less to do with him moving to the bullpen and more to do with some mechanical changes that he made that he said he'd been trying to do for a while, but wasn't really able to when he was on that regular 5-day rotation and dealing with the injuries that he's had to deal with. In the bullpen, he was pitching multiple innings, so it's not like they brought him in and said, okay, hey, you're now a 1-inning flamethrower, something like that. I think this is probably the move that they made this offseason that I could see it going in either direction. This could end up being a great move for them, and $9 million could be a bargain. If he's anything like the guy who was a Rookie of the Year candidate with the Braves, that's a while ago in 2019. But if he's anything like that, that's a great pickup on a 1-year, $9 million deal. Or if he is not that guy either because of injury or ineffectiveness, and now you're spending that money on someone, are you going to feel compelled to keep him in the rotation? Are you going to bump him to the bullpen? Are you going to have to give up on him at some point? I think there's a wide variance there in what you can get from Sykora this year, and I'm really fascinated to see how that plays out.
Yeah, and it's hard to ignore. He failed as a starter for not just any team last season, but for the major league worst Chicago White Sox. So it's like, what does that say? That he couldn't cut it as a starter for the pathetic White Sox last season. But we'll see. Like you said, I mean, the guy has had success. That 2019 rookie season, he was outstanding for Atlanta that season. But as we have come to know, the year 2019 was a while ago. So you can't just keep living off 2019. Well, before we call it a show, like I said earlier, we are doing shout outs on the Nats Chat podcast once again. this season. Email Tim Shovers to get in your shout out, natschatpodcast@gmail.com. We have this from the official rabbi of the Nats Chat podcast, Rabbi Eric Fussfield. Mazel tov to young Brian Zuckerman on the occasion of his bar mitzvah. I'm sure his parents, Nats Chat co-host Mark Zuckerman and Rachel, were cavelling at Brian's achievement. May he continue to bring his family many years of nachas and joy in the future. So there you go, the rabbi with a shout out to the Zuckerman family.
Thank you very much, Rabbi, and good job, Al, on pronouncing kvel and nachas. Not the easiest words to pronounce for someone not of the faith. It has been a whirlwind few weeks for yours truly. The bar mitzvah was on Saturday, and then I left for Florida on Tuesday, just before the snow hit. But it was a hugely successful event. Brian did a phenomenal job. I can't stress that enough. My wife, Rachel, did a phenomenal job planning and preparing for all of this, and everybody had a great time. And I am such a proud father right now, given what he accomplished. And it was a little strange because my mind really was not on baseball for those last few weeks prior to spring training. And then you kind of flip a switch, you arrive here at spring training, and now I'm ready to go with that. And they're back home shoveling their way out of the snow, unfortunately. Sorry, guys. But thank you very much to the rabbi for a very nice shout out there.
That's outstanding. Awesome to hear that you guys had a great time, and awesome to be back with everyone for another season of the Nats Chat podcast. Hit us up on X at Nats_chat. Hit us up on Blue Sky at Nats Chat Podcast. Email the show, natschatpodcast@gmail.com, including if you would like to sponsor the podcast, if you would like to advertise on the podcast, all kinds of ways we can serve you. Let Tim Shovers know what we can do for you. All Nationals radio highlights on Nats Chat are courtesy of 106.7 The Fan. Like I said earlier, we'll be doing at least one episode per week during National Spring Training as we are off and running 2025 National Spring Training in West Palm Beach, Florida. Feels good to say that, even though we are still very much in the dead of winter in the Washington, D.C. area. But for Mark Zuckerman, I'm Al Galdi. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time on the Nats Chat Podcast.
By the way, could you do me a favor and tell Mitchell Tannenbaum that I will be unable to attend this Saturday?
Are you free Friday night?
I am, but that is not the point. You are 13 and I am in my early 20s.
But I'm a man. The rabbi said so.
No, you are not a man. It takes a long time to become a man. I mean, half my friends aren't even there yet.
Well, if I'm not a man, then this whole thing was a sham. First he said I was gonna get great gifts, and then somebody gives me boggle.